It's 10:45 a.m., the 27th of September 2025. The waters of the Taiwan Strait look calm until a sharp tone cracks across the bridge of USS Higgins, a U.S. destroyer on a freedom of navigation run. The radar screen flashes. Two fast-moving contacts from the west, altitude shifting, track steady. Alarms sound. Sailors snap to stations. Outside, sunlight glitters on swells as the ship's Spy 1 DV locks on. The contacts are unmanned aircraft Chinese-made, closing inside 6 kilometers. In Combat Information Center, voices stay clipped. One wrong move could turn a patrol into a crisis. Track and classify. Weapons tight, the captain orders. Then another spike. A Type 50 2D lights a brief 3-second radar illumination, short, deliberate, enough to say, "We see you." Flight deck crews spin up an MH-60R with FLIR and ESM. A Sea Guardian orbits high, feeding Link 16 updates. On the bow, a non-lethal laser dazzler stands ready. The ship holds fire. Cameras roll. Evidence matters tonight. The Taiwan Strait has long been a line neither side wants to cross, but both test daily. For the U.S., every patrol by USS Higgins is a statement. Freedom of navigation isn't up for debate. For China, every approach is a reminder that these are their waters. Between them, 45 nautical miles of open sea hold the world's most dangerous calm. That morning, Higgins wasn't hunting, it was proving presence. The destroyer's job: protect global trade routes that move trillions in goods each year. Fuel, chips, food, all flow through this narrow corridor. If one encounter turns hostile, markets shake and allies lose faith. The crew knows even a simple UAV can record radar modes and reaction times, intel worth gold in future wars. Overhead, a Sea Guardian circles at 25,000 feet, streaming video. Near the waves, a Mantas T-38 collects signal data. Together they weave an invisible shield eyes without aggression. Across the horizon, a Type 52D shadows in silence. Its radar cold but ready. Above it, BZK-005E drones orbit like hawks, pushing the limit. Both ships ride the median line, about 45 nautical miles east of Kinmen, close enough for eyes on, far enough to avoid a collision course. Both sides stay within rules, no shots, no contact, but every second feels like the edge of something bigger. Each side holds long-range sticks, SM-2 on Higgins, HHQ-9B on the 52D, so restraint isn't just optics, it's survival. To the sailors, this isn't politics, it's trust, precision, and calm under pressure. One wrong call could rewrite the next morning's headlines. For now, Higgins holds steady bow toward the threat. Recorders running, every move archived. And you watching this unfold, what do you think? Should the US keep holding back or push back harder? Comment 1 if you stand with restraint, or 9 if you'd go full response. 10:47 a.m. The first BZK-005E drops lower its altitude cut to just 1,200 meters. On radar, the echo swells as it crosses the port beam at barely 3.5 kilometers. To the crew, it's close enough to see the shape glinting in sunlight. Inside CIC, tension spikes. The captain's voice stays calm. Maintain course. No reaction yet. A soft command follows. Activate Dazzler. On deck, a sailor aligns a green laser deterrent toward the drone. A beam flashes bright, silent, harmless but unmistakable. It's not aggression, it's a warning. We see you too. The UAV wobbles, banks right, and climbs slightly. Camera pod turning back toward the destroyer like an unblinking eye. At the same time, the Type 52D slides closer, hull number now visible through binoculars. Its radar flicks on again, just seconds, but enough for ESM sensors to log frequency and pulse width. That data is gold for analysts back home. Onboard Higgins, the SPY-1DV switches to full record mode, while Sea Guardian relays the radar signature in real time via Link 16. Every ping, every pixel, stored. 10:49 a.m. The Chinese ship launches a second UAV, larger, sleeker, CH-5. It rises fast, its silhouette clear against the haze. But the American MQ-9B above catches the signal burst. Within moments, Its electronic sweep floods the channel, forcing the CH-5 to divert west after barely 2 minutes. On the Sea Guardian's feed, the second drone's turn is almost graceful, like it realized the game was lost. Below, sailors exhale but don't relax. Stay sharp, the XO reminds them. They're watching how we react. The bridge keeps course steady, 15 knots east, northeast. The sea looks calm again, but everyone knows it's only surface calm underneath. Invisible data warfare is raging. By 10:53, recording systems across all platforms, radar, FLIR, and acoustic logs are running full tilt. A gray MH-60R Seahawk hovers above, cameras rolling, its crew marking every move. From that height, the UAVs look like black dots fleeing into cloud. For a moment, the airwaves go quiet. Then one last blip fades from the screen. No explosions, no shots, just a trail of evidence time-stamped, encrypted, undeniable. 10:54 a.m. The air is thick with tension. The first drones retreat west, but sensors keep painting faint contacts, ghost reflections, maybe decoys. Could be new launches, an operator mutters. The captain leans closer to the radar screen. Hold track, don't blink. Minutes stretch. The Type 52D alters course 5 degrees starboard, barely noticeable, but enough to tighten the distance. It's not aggression, it's pressure. The Chinese ship now rides parallel, less than 8 nautical miles off Higgins Beam. Both vessels exchange coded bridge-to-bridge calls, dry, polite, rehearsed. Every word matters. Every silence louder than gunfire. On the flight deck, MH-60R Seahawk hovers back aboard. Its FLIR pod glows hot from hours of recording. Technicians offload footage and plug into secure storage. Meanwhile, Sea Guardian still circles high, its sensors sweeping for any electromagnetic spike. For a moment, it catches a new emission narrowband radar from the Type 56 Ampere's corvette just entering range. They're stacking sensors, the Iwu says. 3 layers watching us. The SPY-1DV radar shifts mode again, low power, wide sweep enough to watch without provoking. Below decks, the USV Mantis T-38 surfaces briefly, antennas up, scanning the spectrum for command signals. The bridge crew feels the subtle vibration of the ship's hull engines trimmed to keep noise low, signatures steady. It's like holding your breath for minutes at a time. 10:58. A sharp ping cuts through the comnet. One of the Chinese UAVs returns at the edge of radar range. This time, it flies higher, as if daring the Americans to react. The captain watches the trace for a long second before saying, "Log it." No response. Let the data speak. In the CIC, sailors glance at each other, no words, no panic. The destroyer holds formation, bow steady, weapons tight. Both sides know the math. A single missile launch would drag half the Pacific into the fight. That's why silence feels heavier than any blast. For now, the horizon clears, but the weight doesn't lift. 2 warships, 2 doctrines, both convinced they're right. If you were standing there, hearing that radar tone build, would you stay calm like Higgins? Or fire first to end the pressure? Press 1 to hold your fire, or 9 if you'd break the silence. 11:01 a.m. The radar picture finally steadies. Then a thin trace appears, low and fast. Not an aircraft. Surface contact, bearing 2205 miles. The operator calls. The mark skims the wave tops. The captain studies the return. Fishing boats? No. The pulse is too clean. Analysts flag it in seconds. A fast unmanned surface craft, Chinese-made, running dark. No AIS, no lights, straight for Higgins' projected bow. Amber alert. Below, compartment secure for collision. Topsides, the Mantis T-38 lifts its ESM mast and feeds a steady bearing. Closing 35 knots, the XO says. They're probing the low elevation blind. SPY-1DV dips its look-down sweep. The picture sharpens. A 10-meter hull, planning hard. Not a missile, not yet a weapon, but geometry doesn't lie another minute on this course, and someone must turn. Launch the Seahawk. Mark and record. The captain orders. Weapons remain tight. On the flight deck, rotors bite the air. The MH-60R arcs out and drops into a shallow run. FLIR paints the USV in stark detail. The crew tags coordinates and pushes clips to link 1-6. Gunners run silent checks, then wait. A momentary control link spike, then a flicker. The Type 52D loiters to the west, silent witness. Radios click, then settle. At last the craft yaws 10 degrees, then 20, and slides off the line westbound. Wake spreading. No challenge issue. None answered. Only data and the ache of adrenaline. On Higgins, the captain exhales. Log it unsafe intercept surface, he says. Screens dim a notch. Everyone knows the truth. This wasn't random. Somebody just measured how long the United States will wait. CIC files every ping, every frame. The sea looks calm again, but nobody buys it. 11:05 a.m. The sea is calm again, too calm. But inside USS Higgins, tension hums like electricity. The crew knows this pattern. Silence before another push. On the radar, faint returns flicker at long range. Multiple air contacts, probable drones, the operator calls. The tone in his voice says it all. Round 2. BZK-005E drones reappear, this time at staggered altitudes. One dives low, the other stays high. Classic split tactics to test reaction time. ESM confirms active radar sweep. The electronic officer adds, "They're mapping us." The captain doesn't hesitate. Bring the ship to general quarters. Record everything. Klaxons wail. Boots slam metal decks. The SPY-1DV radar surges to full power, locking both UAV. The crew braces as the destroyer shifts to combat posture. Above, the Sea Guardian dives to shadow the incoming pair, streaming live telemetry. Its feed shows the low drone slicing toward the horizon line just 3 kilometers out. Range 3, 500 meters. Request permission to dazzle again, the weapons officer asks. Granted. A green beam flashes over the sea, scattering through mist. The drone jolts, banking hard left. The second one keeps coming. 11:07. The Type 52D powers up its radar spikes in full illumination mode. For 3 full seconds, the CIC glows with harsh light. "They locked us," someone says quietly. The captain's reply is colder. "Log it. Maintain discipline." The Aegis display pulses red, missiles armed but unfired. In the sky, the second UAV drops low, crossing the bow. The MH-60R swings wide, tracking it on FLIR. The image is crystal clear: markings, wings, payload. That's the shot the Pentagon wants. Undeniable proof of harassment. Seconds later, the drone veers off, engine whining as it retreats west. Silence returns. The ocean looks normal, but every sailor feels the adrenaline still burning. The ship didn't fire, yet every system from radar to missiles was a single command away from combat. On the bridge, the captain watches the empty sky. "Today we held the line," he said softly. But lines don't hold forever. And as the ship's hum settles back to a steady rhythm, the question lingers: when the next radar lock comes, what would you do? Stay your hand like Higgins? Or pull the trigger first? Press 1 if you'd hold your fire, or 9 if you'd answer it head on. By noon, the Taiwan Strait returns to its deceptive calm. The sun climbs higher, waves glitter, and USS Higgins resumes her course as if nothing happened. But inside the ship, no one mistakes this silence for peace. Every sailor knows the encounter will echo far beyond these waters. Within hours, encrypted data packets leave the ship: radar logs, FLIR footage, and telemetry, all bound for Pacific Fleet Command. The chain of review begins. Analysts in Pearl Harbor, intelligence staff in Washington, diplomats at the State Department. The footage of a Chinese drone flashing across the destroyer's bow becomes the day's headline. Insurers tweak risk models. Merchant ships widen routes. In Tokyo and Canberra, staffers request copies because proof shapes policy. Beijing calls it routine monitoring. Washington calls it unsafe and unprofessional. Yet behind closed doors, both sides know what really matters: timing. The United States just proved it can absorb provocation without overreacting, while China proved it can test boundaries without crossing them, at least not yet. On board Higgins, the mood is quiet pride mixed with fatigue. The crew gathers for debrief, replaying every frame, every transmission. "We didn't flinch," the XO says simply, heads nod. They know restraint is harder than retaliation. Tactics are updated, logs refined, lessons filed where the next watch can find them. That night, the captain steps out to the deck. The sea stretches endless and dark, radar dishes glowing faintly under starlight. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the Type 52D is still there, watching, waiting. The line between peace and war feels paper thin. He watches the wake fade behind the ship, voice low but steady. "This is what the gray zone feels like," he says. "Not bullets, not missiles, just pressure and patience." And as the scene fades to black, one question remains for anyone watching. If that pressure keeps building, do you keep holding the line, or finally push back? Press 1 if you'd hold your ground, or 9 if it's time to break the silence. Late April light shimmered across the Taiwan Strait, calm on the surface, tight with tension underneath. On the 24th of April 2025, the USS William P. Lawrence, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer of the 7th Fleet, cut a deliberate track through those waters. This was a freedom of navigation operation, not pageantry, but a statement. These are international seas, and international seas remain open. High above, a U.S. Navy P-8 Poseidon swept broad arcs over sky and sea, its sensors harvesting every echo, wake, and heat plume. Allied receivers listened in, feeds stitched together a live mosaic for commanders ashore and afloat, a carefully choreographed patrol meant to be seen. Visibility here was part of the message. The Taiwan Strait, a 110-mile wide corridor between Taiwan and mainland China, is among the world's most politically charged passages. Beijing claims it as internal waters. Washington and much of the international community does not. The William P. Lawrence sailed uninvited, unapologetic, and compliant with international law. Every mile carried layered meaning: routine transit on paper, high-stakes signaling in practice. Bridge teams kept their checklists crisp. Lookouts scanned steel-blue horizons. Combat systems hummed in quiet readiness. The destroyer knew it was on more than a charted course, it was on a line both sides watch. And in these waters, what you show can shape what happens next. Visibility, after all, cuts both ways. Chinese tracking screens were already lit before the destroyer neared midpoint. Long-range radar nets on the mainland sketched a bright line across the strait, reporting speed, course, and time to intercept. A Plan Y-8 patrol aircraft lifted from a coastal base. Farther out, a gray hull warship 132 slid into a parallel shadow 3 to 4 nautical miles abeam, matching knots and keeping station. The radio challenge arrived in a flat, rehearsed cadence. "This is Chinese Warship 132. You are approaching Chinese territorial waters. Turn around immediately." On the William P. Lawrence, no one flinched. The bridge logged the hail. CIC recorded its standard script, familiar rhythm, nothing to escalate. What changed was the air picture. Controllers vectored a PLAF J-16 from the east, low and fast, masking in sea clutter. The destroyer's sensors painted the contact bearing 086, descending, accelerating. The choreography was unmistakable. Ship to fix the scene, patrol plane to watch it, fighter to press it. AMCON stayed low, cameras rolled, and every syllable track and timestamp streamed live to Indo-Pacific Command. The approach was no ad-lib. It was a measured test of nerve, and the next move would arrive on a roar. A faint speck emerged from the eastern haze, growing fast against the horizon. Within moments, the shape resolved into a PLAF J-16 twin afterburners glowing, Delta Canard wings slicing the salt air. Its reputation preceded it. China's most advanced multi-role fighter, capable of mounting PL-10 short-range infrared missiles, PL-15 long-range radar-guided missiles, and precision anti-ship weapons. Today, its pylons looked clean, but the way it flew was its own kind of armament. In CIC, operators watched its data stream appear across consoles, bearing 086, altitude 250 feet, closing at Mach 0.9. The SPY-1 radar locked on instantly, feeding precise vectors into the ship's fire control network. Though it could track hundreds of contacts, all eyes fixed on this one. On deck, sailors leaned forward against the rush of wind. The fighter skimmed so low the sea spray bloomed behind its fuselage, glinting in the sunlight. Then, without warning, it dropped even lower and tore past the destroyer's bow within an estimated 150 feet. The shockwave slammed into the William P. Lawrence, rattling steel railings, shaking loose gear, and sending a brief shudder through the hull. This was no navigational oversight. The pass was calibrated to be just inside the boundary of plausible deniability, yet deep within the psychological strike zone. The jet had entered the destroyer's weapons engagement zone, a lethal envelope where, if hostile, it could launch ordnance in seconds. Bridge officers stayed composed, following the rules of engagement. No escalation unless directly threatened. Still, defensive systems shifted quietly into readiness. The Mk-45 5-inch gun angled toward the threat vector. The phalanx CIWS rotated to standby, its motors whining under the wind's roar. High-speed cameras and EO/IR sensors captured every frame. Acoustic and electronic logs marked every decibel and pulse. The J-16 climbed into a wide bank, vapor streaming from its wingtips before leveling out in open air. The tension eased fractionally, but everyone aboard knew the encounter wasn't finished. Inside CIC, the first pass was dissected frame by frame. Trajectory, closure rate, and altitude all met Indo-Pacific Command's unsafe criteria. More troubling, the fighter had entered the destroyer's weapons engagement zone without hesitation, demonstrating how rapidly a launch could occur if intent flipped from theater to kill. The lesson was blunt. Reaction time would be measured in heartbeats, not minutes. Fire control held a clean lock while sensors fused radar, EO, IR, and ESM tracks into a single picture. The bridge kept ROE steady, no illumination, no chaff, no flares, while watch officers weighed possibilities. Hotshot pilot freelancing or a scripted probe designed to map the ship's thresholds. Either way, readiness stayed high. Teams cycled quickly, checklists ran tight, and cameras never stopped. Minutes later, the air picture sharpened. The J-16 rolled out of its arc and dropped again, lower than before, masking in sea clutter until the last moment. Sailors on deck could see the pilot's helmet gleam, and the canopy flash as the nose pointed almost directly at the bow. The jet thundered in, passed just over the forecastle so close, the mast seemed to scrape its shadow and clawed skyward in a hard-climbing left bank. Heat shimmered across the superstructure, a violent echo of exhaust and pressure. Such proximity was not theater without risk. A slip in altitude or angle could have clipped antennas or rigging, forcing an immediate defensive response and cascading the encounter into headlines. Then crisis talks. In waters this politicized, physics and politics are separated by inches. Defenses remained poised, yet deliberately restrained. The Mk-45 stayed trained to sector. Phalanx remained on the edge of spin-up. Decoys were checked but cold. Logs noted each second. Bearing, range, altitude, radio hail, and pilot visible confirmation. The J-16 leveled, climbed to medium altitude, and began a wide orbit near enough to remind the crew it was not done. The message was unmistakable. The test was still running, and every move from here would count. For the next 90 minutes, the encounter settled into a taut rhythm. The J-16 circled at medium altitude, never straying far enough to disengage, never closing quite enough to trigger a response. Its engine noise drifted in and out, a constant reminder above the hum of turbines and the rush of water along the hull. Below decks, CIC maintained continuous tracking, bearing shifts, altitude changes, and any electronic emissions were logged in real time. The bridge rotated watch teams to keep eyes fresh. Lookouts scanned every quadrant, noting the faint outline of the Chinese warship shadowing at 3 to 4 nautical miles, maintaining a perfectly parallel course. The planned frigate made no aggressive moves, its presence steady, almost patient, like a chess piece left in place to remind the opponent of its reach. The atmosphere aboard the William P. Lawrence was focused, but calm. No one allowed the tension to slip into panic. Discipline was part of the deterrent, yet everyone knew this was not a drill. In the Taiwan Strait, visibility is both a shield and a lure. Each side wanted to be seen. to signal resolve without crossing the invisible threshold into combat. In these prolonged standoffs, time itself becomes a weapon. The J-16's steady orbit was as much a psychological tactic as a tactical one, forcing the destroyer's crew to maintain peak alertness, knowing that any lapse could be exploited. The William P. Lawrence matched that patience, holding course, speed, and composure, silently broadcasting its own message: "We are here, and we are not leaving." Eventually, the J-16 broke its pattern. After a final wide orbit, it banked east and climbed, its afterburner glow fading into the haze. The Chinese warship maintained its shadow for several more miles before easing south, matching the destroyer's gradual separation. With the air threat gone, the William P. Lawrence completed its transit through the strait deliberately and without deviation, steady, visible, and unapologetic. But the incident's life was far from over. Within hours, U.S. Indo-Pacific Command released an official statement. A PRC J-16 fighter jet conducted an unsafe intercept of a U.S. Navy destroyer operating in international waters. This type of behavior is dangerous and risks miscalculation. The language was measured but firm, signaling Washington's unwillingness to normalize such maneuvers. In Beijing, state media countered quickly, framing the intercept as a defensive action against foreign intrusion. Commentators accused the U.S. of provocation, stressing China's claim over the Taiwan Strait as internal waters. The footage told its own story. High-definition video from the destroyer's cameras showed the J-16's dangerously close passes in unforgiving clarity engines, screaming, wings banking low enough to cast shadows across the deck. For the crew, it was just another day in a contested maritime corridor. For leaders in Washington, Beijing, and Taipei, it was another entry in a growing ledger of tense encounters. Inside Washington's briefing rooms and their counterparts in Beijing and Taipei, the 24th of April encounter was treated less as a headline than as usable data. Every radar, sweep, camera frame, and radio hail from the William P. Lawrence was archived, time-stamped, and cross-referenced with prior incidents to map trends in PLA behavior. Analysts look for patterns in the J-16's entry profile, its willingness to penetrate the weapons engagement zone, and the choreography between fighter, patrol plane, and shadowing warship. Past precedent sharpened the picture. In 2023, a Chinese fighter cut across the nose of a U.S. reconnaissance aircraft, forcing it through turbulent jet wash. In 2024, another J-16 released chaff and flares dangerously close to a U.S. surveillance plane. Buzzing a guided missile destroyer at low altitude and high speed felt like the next rung on the ladder, and escalation calibrated for psychological effect without crossing the hard line of kinetic exchange. For Beijing, the signal is layered. Domestically, it projects resolve. Regionally, it contests U.S. access. Internationally, it tests how elastic international waters can be made in practice. For Washington, deterrence must be equally layered, sailing where law allows while denying the PLA a pretext to paint the U.S. as the provocateur. That balance pushes stress downward onto crews whose reactions are measured in seconds. The encounter also exposes human factors. At 250 feet and 0.9 Mach, the cockpit is a cockpit of consequences. A gust, a misread altitude tape, a half-second delay each could force defensive fire or a collision neither side intended. Doctrine can script options. It cannot script adrenaline. Planners will now feed the 24th of April into simulations. ROE refinements, camera placement, IMCON posture, decoy timing, and deconfliction calls. Diplomats will weigh whether to press for tighter air-sea encounter protocols. Yet the core reality remains unchanged. In the gray zone, the most decisive weapons are judgment, restraint, and narrative control, and the margin for error keeps shrinking. The 24th of April intercept will fade from the news cycle, but not from the operational memory of those who study the Taiwan Strait. For the crew of the William P. Lawrence, it was one more log entry in a long roster of tense patrols. For commanders and policymakers, it was a live demonstration of how modern power competition often unfolds, not with salvos, but with close passes, locked radars, and the calculated edge of intimidation. Gray zone operations thrive in ambiguity. where each side can frame its actions as defensive while probing the other's tolerance. The J-16's low-level runs illustrated how fragile that balance is. A misjudged turn or a mechanical fault at 500 knots could have transformed a test of nerve into a regional crisis within minutes. These encounters underscore a simple truth. The Strait is not just a strategic waterway, it is a pressure point. Every transit, every intercept, and every public statement tightens or loosens the tension wound around it. Neither side shows signs of backing away. Both continue to assert presence, pushing the limits without crossing them outright. In such an environment, restraint is not weakness, it is survival. The April incident is now a case study, a reminder to all players that the line between assertion and aggression is razor thin. In the Taiwan Strait, where politics, pride, and proximity collide, there is no room for error. One reckless move is all it takes to change the map.